The black ice swallowed light. I pressed my gloved hand against the cavern wall and felt the cold seep through 3 layers of insulation. My thermal converter hummed softly at my hip, its blue ring casting strange shadows across crystal formations that looked like frozen smoke. The briefing had been clear. Absolute silence in the deep zones. Sound behaved differently down here. The black ice amplified every whisper, every breath, turning noise into something that traveled farther than it should. I was 200 meters below the surface now, descending through a fissure barely wide enough for my shoulders. The converter's light caught facets in the ice, refracting into 1,000 pale blue fragments. Somewhere far below, something moved. I heard it, a scraping sound that echoed up through the shaft. Then silence. I held my breath without thinking. My heart hammered against my ribs, too loud in my own ears. The echo didn't repeat. Whatever made it had stopped moving, or started listening. The mission was simple on paper: descend into the black ice caves beneath Theros Station, extract bioreactive crystal fragments, return before the treatment window closed. 3 days. That's how long my sister had. How long any of them had. 42 colonists infected with something the medical team couldn't identify, couldn't stop. The crystals were the last option, a geological anomaly that showed biocompatible properties in early scans. Nobody knew if they'd work. But when you're watching people waste away in quarantine pods, you don't wait for certainty. I'd volunteered before anyone else could. Command approved it within the hour. Solo descent, minimal equipment, 6 hours of oxygen. Get in, get the crystals, get out. They didn't mention the frost mimics. Or maybe they thought the creatures stayed in the upper caves, where sound was easier to track. Either way, I was alone now, sliding deeper into a place that felt older than human presence on this planet. The fissure opened into a wider chamber. I dropped the last meter and landed in a crouch, my boots crunching on granular ice. The converter's light swept across the space. Columns of black ice rose like cathedral pillars, their surfaces smooth and impossibly dark. Between them, clusters of bioreactive crystals grew in irregular patterns, glowing faintly with their own pale luminescence. Jackpot. I moved carefully, each step deliberate. The ice here was stable, but sound carried in ways that defied logic. I'd heard stories from early surveyors, descriptions of echoes that arrived before the original sound, of whispers that multiplied into crowds. The black ice didn't just amplify noise, it transformed it. My sister's face flashed through my mind. Elena, 23, always laughing even when things fell apart. She'd been the first to show symptoms: a fever that climbed too fast, tissue degradation that started at the extremities and moved inward. The medical bay had become a gallery of slow deterioration. People I'd shared meals with, worked alongside, watched them fade behind quarantine glass. Elena kept trying to joke about it, kept trying to smile through the pain. That stopped 3 days ago when she lost consciousness. I knelt beside the nearest cluster and pulled out the extraction tool, a simple mechanical cutter designed to work without power cells. Anything electronic risked generating vibration. I positioned the blade against a crystal node and applied pressure. The fragment separated with a soft crack. I froze, listening. Nothing. I slipped the crystal into the insulated pouch at my chest and reached for another. That's when I saw the glow shift. Not the crystals, the ice itself. Bioluminescence rippled across the chamber wall, faint blue patterns that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. I'd read about this in the geological reports, a bacterial colony that lived in the ice, responding to thermal changes, beautiful and unsettling in equal measure. Then I heard it. A grinding sound, low and deliberate, not random, not geological. I looked up slowly and saw the silhouette through the translucent wall, distorted by layers of black ice but unmistakably moving. The frost mimic. It was larger than I'd expected, at least 3 meters long, its body nearly invisible except for the faint refraction of light along its edges. The report said they hunted by echolocation, tracking prey through sound in the deep caves where light didn't penetrate. This one shouldn't be here. The bioreactive zone was supposed to be too deep, too cold even for mimics. But there it was, circling the chamber's perimeter just beyond the ice wall. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My pulse hammered in my temples, each beat a small betrayal. The mimic paused, its form shifting as it angled what might have been a head. Listening. I watched it through the ice, trying to understand its pattern. It moved in a slow arc, then stopped. Moved again. Stopped. Not random. Methodical. My lungs burned. I let out a breath as slowly as I could manage, a thin stream of vapor that dissipated in the frigid air. The mimic didn't react. I took another breath, just as careful. My heart was the problem. Every accelerated beat generated micro vibrations, subtle percussion that traveled through bone and boot into the ice. I needed to slow down, needed to treat this like a meditation, like the zero-gravity drills where panic meant death. I closed my eyes and counted. 4 seconds in, hold for 8 seconds out. The cold helped. It was easier to stay calm when your body was already shutting down non-essential processes to conserve heat. After a minute, my heart rate dropped. I opened my eyes. The mimic was closer, not outside the chamber anymore, inside. It had found an opening I hadn't seen, a gap in the ice wall narrow enough that I'd missed it in my initial sweep. The creature moved with unsettling grace, its translucent body flowing across the uneven floor like liquid given temporary form. I could see through it to the crystals beyond, their glow distorted by the mimic's strange anatomy. I was behind a column of black ice, pressed flat against its surface. The cold bit through my suit, through skin, into muscle. My extraction pouch held 4 crystal fragments. Not enough. I needed at least 8 to have a viable sample for synthesis. But the mimic was between me and the largest cluster. The creature's movement pattern was strange. It wasn't searching, it was positioning. Every few seconds it would shift, adjust its location by a meter or 2, always maintaining a specific distance from me, like it was calculating something. The geological surveys had mentioned mimics using complex echolocation, building 3-dimensional maps of their environment through reflected sound. Maybe it already knew exactly where I was. Maybe it had known since I entered the chamber. That's when I noticed the converter. The thermal unit at my hip was pulsing, very faint, very regular. A soft throb of light beneath the housing. I frowned. It shouldn't do that. The device was passive, converting ambient thermal differentials into usable heat for the suit. No active components. No reason to pulse. I reached down slowly and disabled the external display, cutting the blue ring light. The pulsing continued, visible now only through a hairline seam in the casing. Some kind of diagnostic mode, maybe, or a malfunction. Either way, I couldn't risk any signal. I pressed the manual override, forcing the unit into standby. The pulse continued, unchanged, indifferent to my commands. The mimic stopped moving. It was 5 meters away, oriented directly toward my position. I could see its internal structure now, geometric patterns that might have been organs or might have been crystalline formations. No eyes, no obvious sensory organs. But it knew where I was. It had always known. I had 2 options. The demolition charge in my pack could collapse the side tunnel, creating a new exit and burying the mimic under tons of ice. But the explosion would shatter the crystal formations, render them useless. Everything I'd come for would be destroyed. The alternative was to move through the mimic's territory in absolute silence, reach the remaining crystals, and find another way out. High risk, higher potential, and no guarantee the creature would let me pass. I thought about my sister. About Elena in the quarantine pod, her breathing shallow, her skin taking on that translucent quality that meant the infection was reaching critical stages. About 42 people in the same condition. About the empty spaces that would open in the colony if I came back without enough material to synthesize a treatment. The choice made itself. I moved. 1 centimeter at a time, shifting weight from my back foot to my front, testing each placement before committing. The ice was uneven, covered in a thin layer of frost that crunched if you weren't careful. I placed each boot on solid black ice, avoiding the crystalline deposits. The mimic remained motionless, a statue of refracted light and translucent flesh. 10 meters to the crystal cluster. I covered the first meter in 5 minutes. The cold was becoming dangerous now. My core temperature was dropping. the suit's heating elements struggling without the converter at full capacity. I could feel my fingers going numb inside the gloves, the tips burning with that particular pain that precedes frostbite. I flexed them carefully, trying to maintain circulation without making sound. The mimic moved. Just a slight rotation, tracking my position with whatever senses it possessed. I froze mid-step, balanced on one foot like some absurd statue. My muscles screamed. I held the position, trembling with effort, watching the creature. It moved again, flowing forward 2 meters in complete silence, then stopped, not attacking, not fleeing. Positioning itself between me and the entrance I'd used, I completed the step, brought my back foot forward with agonizing slowness. The mimic moved again, this time circling behind me, cutting off the route to the surface. I understood then. It wasn't hunting. It was herding, keeping me contained. But why? What was it protecting? I reached the crystal cluster and knelt slowly, painfully. My knees cracked, the sound impossibly loud in the silence. The mimic rotated toward me but didn't advance. I pulled out the extraction tool and positioned it against the largest crystal. The fragment was beautiful up close, its internal structure like frozen lightning. I applied pressure. The crystal came free with a sound like breaking glass. I flinched, waiting for the mimic to rush forward. It didn't. It just watched, if watching was the right word for whatever it was doing. I harvested 3 more fragments, working as quickly as silence allowed. 7 total. Almost enough. The medical team had said 8 was optimal, 6 was minimum. 7 sat in the uncertain middle. There was 1 more cluster, smaller, near the chamber's far wall. I started toward it, each step a negotiation with gravity and sound. The ice beneath my boot shifted, a hairline crack, invisible until my weight found it. I lurched sideways, catching myself against an outcropping. A fragment of ice the size of my thumb broke free and fell, striking the floor with a sharp crack that echoed like a gunshot. The sound multiplied, bounced, became a cascade of phantom impacts racing across the chamber. The mimic moved fast, faster than I thought possible for something its size. It flowed across the chamber and I threw myself into a narrow fissure, a gap between 2 ice formations barely wide enough for my body. I wedged myself in, my chest pressed against one wall, my back against the other. The mimic arrived seconds later, its form filling the entrance. I could see its structure up close now, layers of translucent tissue over a geometric skeleton that looked grown rather than evolved. Fractal patterns repeated at different scales, beautiful and alien. It didn't enter the fissure, just stayed at the entrance, motionless, blocking the only exit. I tried to slow my breathing, tried to think past the panic. I was trapped. The fissure extended deeper into the ice but too narrow to navigate with my equipment. I'd have to back out eventually, face whatever the mimic intended, and I had no idea what that was. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. Time felt distorted, stretched thin by cold and fear and the absolute silence. The mimic didn't move, didn't make a sound. Just waited with the patience of something that didn't experience time the way I did. Something that could afford to wait days, weeks, for me to either freeze or surrender. My oxygen display showed 3 hours remaining. The heating elements in my suit were failing, rationing power to keep critical systems running. I could feel the cold creeping deeper, my thoughts slowing, becoming sluggish. This was how it ended. Trapped in a fissure, watching a translucent predator wait for hypothermia to do its work. That's when the converter's pulse changed. The rhythm accelerated, the light visible now even through my suit pocket, bright enough to illuminate the fissure's narrow walls. I pulled it out carefully and stared at the housing. The pulse was rapid, frantic, like a heartbeat in panic. And the metal was warm, too warm. The device should have been ice cold, every joule of thermal energy already harvested. Instead, it was generating heat. I cracked the emergency access panel with shaking fingers and saw them immediately. Silver threads, thousands of them, woven through the converter's internal circuitry like a parasitic nervous system. They moved as I watched, flowing across contact points, wrapping around power conduits, generating heat through friction and chemical processes I didn't understand. Nanoorganisms, too sophisticated to be natural, too organic to be manufactured. Something in between, parasites that had evolved or been designed to feed on thermal differentials. I pulled up the diagnostic display with shaking hands. The readout was clear, clinical in its precision. Thermal-dependent life forms multiplying in response to heat differentials. Generation time, 12 minutes. Current population estimate, 700,000 individual organisms. Projected population in 6 hours, 4 billion. And they'd been in the converter since before I descended. Maybe since the device was issued. Growing, feeding on the waste heat from my body, the ambient thermal energy the converter was designed to harvest. The pulses weren't a malfunction, they were breeding cycles. Every pulse represented a new generation reaching maturity, reproducing, beginning the cycle again. And they'd been multiplying for hours while I descended into the ice, while I extracted crystals, while I ran from the mimic, a biological time bomb sitting at my hip. I looked at the mimic, still blocking the exit. Then at the converter in my hands, at the silver threads writhing through its circuits like mechanical worms, then back at the mimic. Understanding arrived like cold water, shocking and absolute. The creature wasn't hunting me, it was isolating me, keeping me away from the route back to the station. Because if I returned with this infestation, if these parasites reached the colony's thermal systems, they'd spread through the entire habitat in hours. 42 people in quarantine would become 400, then 4,000. The entire colony infrastructure relied on thermal management. Water recyclers, air processors, food synthesis units. All of it would become breeding grounds. The frost mimic was immune to cold. It lived in temperatures that would shatter steel, that approached absolute zero in the deepest caves. But these parasites needed heat. They thrived in it, multiplied in it, died without it. The mimic wasn't a predator, it was a guardian. It had sensed the infestation somehow, recognized the threat, and acted to contain it. And the real danger had been inside my equipment all along, invisible, growing with every passing minute. The briefing had missed it, or someone had planted it deliberately. Sabotage or accident, the result was the same. I was carrying a biological weapon, and the only thing preventing a catastrophic outbreak was a creature humanity had classified as hostile, had marked for avoidance, had never bothered to understand. I looked at the crystal fragments in my pouch. 7 pieces, almost enough to synthesize a treatment. Maybe enough if the medical team was skilled, if they got lucky with the molecular structure. But not if I brought the parasites back with me. Not if saving 42 people meant killing 4,000. The mathematics were brutal, clear, undeniable. I stared at the converter, at the silver threads writhing through its circuits like a living thing. Then I made the choice. The only choice. I opened the access panel fully and pulled out the power core, a cylinder of compressed thermal mass that held the device's reserve energy. The silver threads recoiled immediately, clustering around the warmest components, seeking the heat source. I set the converter on the ice at the fissure's entrance, directly in front of the mimic. The creature didn't move, just watched with whatever senses it possessed. Then I activated the emergency purge. The device vented all stored thermal energy at once, a flash of heat that turned the surrounding air to steam. The temperature in the fissure spiked, then plummeted as the cold rushed in. Absolute cold. The kind of cold that existed in deep space between stars, the kind that stopped molecular motion, that turned gases to solids in microseconds. The converter frosted over instantly, ice forming in crystalline patterns across its surface, growing like time-lapse footage of a snowstorm. The silver threads seized. Their movement slowed, jerked, stopped. They shattered as the ice expanded, breaking into fragments too small to survive, too damaged to reproduce. I watched them die, watched the threat dissolve into harmless debris. The process took 30 seconds. It felt like hours. The mimic watched too. I watched it watch. After a full minute of absolute stillness, the creature moved, flowing backward away from the fissure entrance, leaving the path clear, leaving me a choice I hadn't expected. I extracted myself from the gap, every muscle screaming protest. The mimic retreated farther, maintaining distance, not fleeing, just giving me space. I gathered the 7 crystal fragments, sealed them in the insulated pouch, and looked around the chamber with new eyes. There was another exit, a tunnel I'd missed in my initial survey. Smaller, longer, but it led upward. I could feel the air pressure differential. I started toward it, moving carefully. The mimic didn't follow, just remained in the chamber, a translucent guardian of something humans hadn't understood, had never tried to understand. I paused at the tunnel entrance and looked back. The creature was already still, nearly invisible against the black ice formations, a ghost made of refracted light. I wouldn't report this. Command didn't need to know about frost mimics this deep. Some species didn't need to be discovered. Some ecosystems didn't need human intervention or classification or study. Sometimes the kindest thing was to leave something alone, to let it guard whatever it was guarding in the dark. The climb back took 4 hours. The alternate route was treacherous, my oxygen running critical by the time I saw daylight filtering through a crevasse. I emerged into the gray light of Theros Station's perpetual twilight and collapsed on the ice, my legs refusing to support me any longer. The emergency beacon in my suit activated automatically, sending my coordinates to the surface team. The medical team met me at the airlock 15 minutes later. I handed over the crystal pouch without a word, my fingers too numb to feel the transfer. 7 fragments. They'd have to make it work. They asked about the equipment, about the converter. I told them it failed, that I'd had to abandon it in the deep zones. Technical malfunction happens with extreme cold. They didn't press. They had what they came for, and they did make it work. The synthesis took 18 hours, the medical team working in shifts to decode the crystal's molecular structure and adapt it for human biology. The treatment worked on 39 of the 42 infected. 3 were too far gone, their systems too damaged. But 39 lived. My sister was among them. Elena was the first to wake up, actually, her eyes opening while I sat beside the quarantine pod. She smiled at me, weak but genuine. They called it a miracle. I called it a loan. We owed something to the dark beneath the ice, to the creature that understood threats humans couldn't see, that acted to protect both its ecosystem and ours. My official report listed equipment failure and hazardous conditions. I recommended the deep zones be marked as restricted, classified the geological data, and buried the thermal converter readings in a subsection nobody would read. The parasites went unmentioned. Some threats didn't need to be documented. Some knowledge was better left buried. 6 months later, another survey team requested clearance for the Black Ice Caves. They wanted to study the crystal formations, establish extraction protocols for future medical needs. I denied the request. When they pushed back, cited regulations and scientific necessity, I pulled rank and had the entire sector sealed under executive authority. Geological instability, I wrote in the denial. Risk of catastrophic collapse. Both technically true if you understood what instability meant. Let them think I was being overcautious. Let them think trauma made me paranoid, that the mission had broken something in me. The truth would stay in the ice, with the guardian that had saved us from ourselves. Some debts can't be repaid, only acknowledged, only honored through action. I think about the mimic sometimes when I see my sister in the colony mess hall, laughing with friends like the infection never happened. When I watch the other survivors rebuild their lives, return to work, to families, to futures they almost lost. I think about how close we came to losing everything. And I think about the pulse of light that warned me, that brought me close enough to understand what was really happening. The cold isn't empty, it's patient. And some things that live in darkness see more clearly than we do in the light.